Before the gods were praised and before the stories became loud, there was a long stretch of time when nothing dramatic seemed to happen at all. This is where Loki's story truly begins, not with tricks, chaos, or legend, but with silence, waiting, and watching. While the world hurried toward conflict and glory, Loki remained in the background, living slowly, observing patiently, and letting centuries pass like quiet breaths. This is not the story of mischief or rebellion. It is the forgotten story of stillness, routine, and time itself, a calm journey through the unnoticed life of a god who learned how to endure by doing almost nothing at all. The night in Asgard was quiet, softer than the usual clatter of gods and warriors. Stars shimmered far above the golden halls, and a cool wind whispered through the trees of Yggdrasil. Somewhere, hidden from the eyes of mortals and immortals alike, a god sat alone, watching, waiting. He was neither the strongest nor the wisest in the eyes of others, and yet he had endured longer than many expected. This is not the story of battles, of fire and thunder, but of a long, slow life filled with observation, subtle choices, and quiet cunning. This is the story of Loki. Loki was not like the other gods. He was clever, unpredictable, sometimes mischievous, sometimes quiet in ways that made others uneasy. He did not rush into heroism or glory. He lingered, thinking, observing, testing boundaries. While Thor trained with his hammer and Odin planned the fates of men, Loki wandered the corridors of Asgard and Midgard alike, learning the small truths that no warrior ever bothered to notice. He understood the consequences of time in a way that no one else could. In the early days, Loki's presence brought lightness to Asgard. His tricks were playful, his jokes clever. He shaped shapes from ice and shadows, made impossible things possible for a laugh, or to teach a lesson. Sometimes his antics annoyed the gods, sometimes they inspired them. Always they reminded the others that order was never absolute, and that even immortals could be surprised. Yet beneath the humor, there was patience. Loki watched lives and worlds unfold slowly around him. He observed the changing seasons in Midgard, the rise and fall of kings, the unnoticed decisions of men and gods. He did not intervene unless necessary, and when he did, it was usually for reasons no one could fully understand. That subtlety became the defining trait of his long existence. The first lesson of Loki's quiet life was simple but profound. To endure, one must blend, not by hiding completely, but by being everywhere and nowhere at once. A whisper here, a shadow there, a trick at just the right moment, and the world would bend slightly without even realizing it. The other gods, caught up in honor, strength, and recognition, often overlooked this kind of influence, but Loki understood its power. It was not all play. He also learned restraint. He observed how easily anger could destroy, how unchecked pride could ruin even the mightiest. He watched Thor swing millennia with strength unmatched, and Odin weave the threads of fate, and he understood that even gods must wait for their moment. Patience, subtlety, and timing were as important as any weapon or spell. Over centuries, Loki wandered between worlds, learning stories and secrets. He visited Midgard quietly, watching men and women struggle and endure. He saw love, loss, small acts of kindness, and simple survival. Unlike the gods, he was not bound to judgment or ritual. He could observe without being compelled to interfere, and in that quiet observation, he discovered the true nature of influence. The longest shadows are cast not by force, but by presence. Even in Asgard, where gods often quarreled, Loki remained fluid. He made no permanent alliances, yet he was never truly alone. There were moments of camaraderie, moments of laughter, moments of subtle assistance, and there were moments of quiet reflection, long, endless stretches where he considered the paths of the world and the unseen consequences of even small actions. In those moments, he was fully himself, clever, patient, and enduring. Time passed differently for Loki. While wars erupted, kingdoms rose and fell, and mortals aged and died, he persisted, not because he sought power, not because he craved recognition, but because he understood that life, even among gods, is a long series of choices, small and subtle, observed more than celebrated. This is what allowed him to survive, to endure longer than most, and to witness the ebb and flow of events that others thought inevitable. And so, Loki's life continued quietly. He was neither celebrated nor condemned. He was present, observing, learning, and waiting. The long, slow currents of existence became his companion, and in their quiet rhythm, he discovered a truth that many never see. Survival is not about strength or heroism. It is about subtlety, timing, and endurance. This is the beginning of a long story, a story not of battle or glory, but of the patient, quiet life of Loki. Over centuries, he would endure, he would observe, and he would leave marks that few noticed, yet all would feel, in ways both subtle and profound. The centuries passed quietly, and Loki's long life continued in ways few noticed, while the other gods busied themselves with battles, judgments, and displays of power. Loki moved with patience. He wandered the hidden paths of Asgard, Midgard, and even Jotunheim, observing the quiet rhythms of life. He noticed the small, seemingly insignificant choices of mortals, a farmer planting seeds before the frost, a mother comforting her child in the night, a poet carefully choosing words. These small acts, repeated across time, fascinated him far more than any display of strength or glory. Loki's cleverness had always been apparent in his playful tricks and subtle mischief, yet over time, he learned restraint. The early days of loud jokes and startling illusions gave way to smaller, more deliberate interventions. A misplaced item here, a whispered suggestion there, a carefully timed word that altered the course of events without anyone realizing. He became less a performer and more an observer, shaping outcomes with patience rather than force. Even in the halls of Asgard, Loki's quiet influence persisted. While Thor trained and Odin wove the threads of fate, Loki noticed patterns. He saw the consequences of impatience, the dangers of pride, and the subtle vulnerabilities that even the strongest overlooked, and he waited. Waiting became his art. Every moment of stillness was an opportunity to learn, to observe, and to prepare. During this time, Loki also learned the importance of companionship. Though he rarely formed lasting alliances, he developed a network of connections across worlds. A giant here, a human there, a wandering spirit or a quiet god. All of them recognized his presence in small ways, even if they could not fully understand him. Loki's influence was never direct. It flowed like water, shaping outcomes without force, reminding him that endurance is more subtle than strength. There were quiet pleasures as well. Loki wandered the forests of Midgard in the soft light of dawn, listening to birdsong and watching the wind move through leaves. He would sit by streams, observing ripples as if they carried messages only he could understand. These moments, small and ordinary, were the foundation of his long life. For him, survival was not about heroics, but about savoring the stillness between events, the calm between storms. As ages passed, Loki witnessed changes across realms. Kingdoms rose and fell, heroes were born and forgotten, and mortals aged in patterns both tragic and beautiful. He observed with the patience of centuries, noticing how even minor decisions, a choice to spare a life, a word spoken in kindness, a seed planted could ripple outward, shaping destinies in ways no one expected. In these quiet observations, Loki found fascination and meaning far beyond any immediate reward or recognition. And yet, even in his patience, Loki was aware of his own nature. Clever, mischievous, and unpredictable, he had always been drawn to the edges of order. Over time, his interventions became slower, quieter. He learned that the most enduring influence often goes unnoticed. A fleeting suggestion, a gentle nudge, a hidden solution. These left marks more permanent than any loud display of power. Loki's life, long and winding, became a tapestry of quiet observation and subtle action. While the other gods measured time in battles won, oaths sworn, and domains conquered, Loki measured it in patterns observed, lessons absorbed, and outcomes shaped with care. He understood something they did not. True endurance comes not from spectacle, but from patience, subtlety, and a calm awareness of the world as it moves around you. In this way, centuries passed. Loki remained neither celebrated nor condemned, but present. He watched storms form and fade. Winter turned to spring, mortals flourish and fade, and yet his own presence endured quietly, like a shadow beneath the light. In this long, quiet life, he discovered an enduring truth. The most profound influence is often the one that leaves no trace, yet shapes everything. Loki's story was no longer one of playful mischief alone. It had become a story of patience, subtle observation, and the slow accumulation of knowledge. Each day, each quiet choice, each unnoticed intervention carried him further through time, making him a witness to history in ways no one else could imagine. And so, the long, quiet life of Loki continued, not in battles or fireworks, but in observation, reflection, and the gentle shaping of the world around him, one small, deliberate step at a time. As time continued its slow, endless rhythm, Loki's presence became quietly intertwined with the worlds he wandered. He moved among mortals and immortals alike, rarely noticed, yet always observing. He found fascination not in grand events, but in small, overlooked moments. The way a child's laughter could echo through a hall, the way sunlight shifted through the leaves in a forest, the way a quiet decision could ripple across generations. These were the patterns that intrigued him, far more than any battle or thunderous display of power. Loki's cleverness remained, but it had transformed. He no longer sought attention or dramatic outcomes. His interventions became subtle, deliberate, almost invisible. A suggestion here, a small nudge there, a gentle rearrangement of circumstances, enough to guide events without anyone realizing he had touched them. This careful patience became his signature, and in the silence of such influence, he found a deep, enduring satisfaction. Even among the gods of Asgard, Loki's quiet wisdom began to manifest in unexpected ways. While Odin contemplated the fates and Thor trained in strength, Loki noticed patterns and possibilities that others overlooked. He saw how anger or impatience could unravel plans, how pride could blind even the most skilled, and how small gestures, a word of kindness, a timely warning, a gentle correction, could shape outcomes far more effectively than any act of force. In this way, he became a subtle guide, a quiet presence shaping the unfolding of events without ever seeking credit. Loki also learned the value of observation without interference. Sometimes the wisest action is to watch and wait, to allow time to reveal its lessons. He would linger at the edges of gatherings, listening to conversations, noting behaviors, understanding motives. In doing so, he gained insight not only into others, but into himself. He began to understand the depths of patience, the quiet power of restraint, and the beauty of timing, the perfect moment to act or to remain still. He wandered to Midgard often, walking among mortals who lived fleeting lives, yet whose actions carried weight beyond their comprehension. He saw the births of kings, the passing of great scholars, the triumphs and losses of ordinary people. He watched silently as patterns emerged, how a single act of honesty or deceit could ripple outward, shaping history in subtle ways. Loki learned to appreciate this slow, unfolding drama. Unlike gods who often demanded attention, he understood that true influence is rarely recognized in the moment. Over the centuries, Loki also discovered quiet companionship in unexpected places. Not in permanent alliances, but in fleeting connections. A mortal who remembered a kind gesture, a giant who recognized a subtle cleverness, a wandering spirit who shared a secret. These relationships were brief and often unnoticed by others. Yet they enriched his long life and allowed him to see the world from perspectives beyond his own. Each connection added depth to his understanding of the delicate balance between influence and restraint. Loki's long life taught him the power of patience and subtlety. He saw that enduring quietly often accomplished more than acting loudly. He observed storms that shaped landscapes, rivers that carved valleys over centuries, and trees that grew slowly toward the sky. In the same way, he shaped events gently, almost imperceptibly, leaving marks that would endure without anyone realizing it. He also learned the importance of reflection. After observing events unfold, he would often retreat to quiet corners, sitting by a stream or beneath a tree, pondering what he had seen. These moments of contemplation allowed him to process the intricate threads of cause and effect, understanding how one choice could ripple across time. This introspection became as vital to him as any clever trick or subtle intervention, for it ensured that his influence was thoughtful, not hasty. And so, Loki's long, quiet life continued. He remained neither celebrated nor condemned, merely present, a shadow moving gently through worlds and centuries. He understood that true endurance is not measured by power, conquest, or fame, but by the ability to observe, to adapt, and to act with subtlety over time. His story was one of quiet wisdom, of patience honed across ages, and of influence wielded gently, leaving no trace yet shaping everything. In these centuries, Loki became not only a witness to history, but a part of it woven into the quiet fabric of worlds, shaping events with deliberate care, learning from every choice, and enduring in ways that no one else could fully comprehend. His life was long, slow, and filled with quiet understanding, a reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies not in action, but in patience, observation, and the wisdom to know when to move and when to remain still. Time flowed steadily, as it always does, and Loki's long life continued in quiet observation. He had come to understand the subtle rhythms of existence, the way events intertwined across realms, and how the smallest action could ripple into something far greater over centuries. Unlike the other gods, who measured life in victories, battles, and displays of power, Loki measured it in patterns, in lessons, and in the enduring consequences of patience. He wandered between worlds without urgency. In Midgard, he noticed the rise and fall of civilizations, the slow shaping of landscapes by rivers, wind, and human hands. He observed kings and queens making decisions that seemed monumental to them, but fleeting in the grand flow of time. He watched scholars write texts that would outlast their lives, and poets capture fleeting beauty in words. And in each quiet observation, Loki absorbed the lessons of endurance, subtlety, and timing. In Asgard, he continued to weave his influence subtly. Odin, with his far-reaching knowledge, often overlooked the small shifts that could ripple across the cosmos. Thor, focused on strength and valor, sometimes missed the nuances of timing and consequence. Loki, patient and calm, noticed them. He saw when a careless word might unravel a plan, or when a gentle suggestion could avert unnecessary conflict. He rarely intervened directly, but when he did, it was with quiet precision, guiding outcomes without drawing attention to himself. Even among the giants of Jotunheim, Loki moved quietly. He learned that diplomacy and observation often achieved more than confrontation. A carefully chosen word could prevent unnecessary disputes. A hidden solution could resolve a problem that others thought unsolvable. Over time, Loki realized that enduring influence comes not from force or intimidation, but from subtlety and understanding, from shaping the world in ways so gentle that few notice, yet everyone feels. He also continued to enjoy the simple, overlooked pleasures of life. He would walk through forests at dawn, listening to the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds. He would sit by rivers, watching water ripple around stones, reflecting the slow passage of time. Sometimes, he would watch mortals going about their daily lives, a child learning to read, a farmer tending fields, a couple sharing a quiet moment. These ordinary scenes fascinated him, far more than battles or displays of power ever could. Over the centuries, Loki's patience became a kind of wisdom. He learned to observe without needing to act, to understand without needing to judge. He discovered that endurance is as much about stillness as it is about cleverness. And he realized that the most lasting influence is often invisible, felt only in the gentle, unforeseen changes that guide events over time. Occasionally, Loki would leave traces of himself, subtle signs that he had passed, a misplaced tool here, a whispered word there, a gentle nudge that would save someone from an unseen mistake. These actions were never grand or celebrated. They were quiet, deliberate, and effective, small ripples in a vast slow-moving ocean of time. Through these tiny interventions, Loki shaped outcomes without drawing attention, and in doing so, he practiced a kind of immortality rooted in wisdom rather than fame. Even in solitude, he was never lonely. He discovered that the quiet life allowed him to connect deeply with those who noticed him, even fleetingly. A mortal who remembered his subtle guidance, a giant who shared a secret insight, or a spirit who appreciated a silent gesture. These connections, brief as they were, enriched his understanding of the world. Each interaction reinforced his knowledge that influence does not require domination. It requires awareness, patience, and timing. Loki's story in these centuries was one of calm endurance. While others measured their lives in acts of heroism or conquest, he measured his in observation, in quiet learning, and in the careful shaping of outcomes. His cleverness was no longer loud or mischievous. It was steady, deliberate, and enduring. In this long, slow journey, he discovered that survival is less about escaping danger and more about understanding the subtle currents of life and moving in harmony with them. And so, Loki continued through the ages, neither celebrated nor condemned, simply present. He observed, he reflected, and he shaped the world gently. In forests, halls, and distant lands, his quiet presence endured, teaching him that the most profound impact is often invisible, the most lasting wisdom often silent, and the most enduring life is lived slowly, thoughtfully, and with patience. They say time heals all wounds. They never mention what it does to the gods, who have to watch it all unfold. I've seen empires rise from dust and return to it, their grand monuments swallowed by the very earth that birthed them. I've watched languages evolve, twist, and fade, leaving behind only whispers on the wind that no one living can understand. I remember when the world was younger, when magic was as common as breath, and the 9 realms sang in harmony. We were gods then, not stories. We walked among mortals, our laughter shaking the leaves on the trees, our arguments stirring the storms at sea. Thor, with his righteous thunder and booming voice, always the center of attention. Odin, the All-Father, his one eye seeing farther than any of us could imagine, carrying the weight of all destinies. And me, the outsider, the trickster, the shadow that gave their brilliant light its shape. It's funny, the things you remember. I don't recall the grand battles as clearly as the quiet moments. The way Frigga's hands moved as she wove the fates, the scent of summer rain on Asgard's golden streets, the taste of stolen apples from Idon's garden. These are the fragments that remain sharp, while the sagas blur into a single, epic poem. Mortals are fascinating creatures. They live their lives with such intensity, such fire, a mayfly in the grand scheme of things, but they burn so brightly. I've watched them love with a desperation I could never comprehend, a love born from the knowledge that their time is fleeting. They build legacies in stone and story, hoping to cheat the inevitable, to leave a mark that says, I was here. I walked among them for centuries, wearing different faces, speaking different tongues. I was a scholar in Alexandria, watching its great library burn, feeling the heat of a million lost stories on my skin. I was a jester in a forgotten king's court, whispering truths disguised as jokes. I was a sailor on a ship that discovered new lands, feeling the spray of an unknown ocean. Through it all, I learned. I learned about their capacity for both incredible kindness and unspeakable cruelty. They are paradoxes, wrapped in fragile flesh and bone. I watched them forget us, slowly, then all at once. Our names became myths, our deeds became legends, told to frighten children. Thor's hammer became a symbol on a trinket, Odin's wisdom a forgotten verse, and me, I became the villain in their tales. The whisper of chaos, the embodiment of mischief. It's a role I've learned to wear, like a well-worn cloak. Perhaps it suits me. After all, what is order without a little chaos to test its strength? But even chaos grows weary. There are days, long stretches of them, where I simply sit and watch. I watch a single, stubborn flower push its way through a crack in the pavement. I watch a spider meticulously spin its web in the morning dew, a universe of perfect geometry. I watch the clouds drift across the sky, shape-shifting from dragons to castles, to faces I almost remember. In these quiet moments, the noise of eternity fades. There's a rhythm to the world, a slow, steady heartbeat that you can only hear when you've been listening for a very, very long time. The turning of the seasons, the ebb and flow of the tides, the life and death of stars in the vast, dark expanse. It's all a dance, a grand cosmic ballet, and I am its oldest audience. I once craved a throne. I craved recognition, power, a place at the center of it all. How small those ambitions seem now. The universe is far too large for a single throne to matter. Power is an illusion, a tide that comes in and inevitably goes out, leaving bare the shores of what truly endures. And what endures? Change. That is the one constant, the one truth I have gleaned from my long, long life. Everything changes. The stars rearrange themselves, the mountains erode into sand, and even gods can learn to let go. My brother, in his own way, learned this. He learned to be more than just the god of thunder. He learned humility, sacrifice. I wonder, sometimes, if he ever found his own peace in the quiet moments between battles. I find my peace here, in the in-between, not in Asgard's golden halls, nor in the chaos of a battlefield, but here, watching a child laugh for the first time, watching an old couple hold hands, their shared silence speaking volumes, watching the slow, inexorable march of time that will eventually claim everything, including me, but not yet. There are still sunrises I haven't seen, stories I haven't heard, and tricks I haven't played. The world is a book with an infinite number of pages, and I've only just begun to read it. I am Loki, and my story is far from over. I will watch, and I will wait, and I will remember. For what is a god, if not the memory of the world? Thank you for listening. As the long centuries continued to unfold, Loki found himself increasingly comfortable with silence. What once might have felt like emptiness had become a companion. Silence allowed him to notice the smallest movements of the world, the soft settling of snow on stone, the faint shift of air before dawn, the subtle change in tone when a conversation turned from truth to uncertainty. In these quiet details, Loki felt more connected to existence than ever before. He spent long periods simply remaining in one place. Sometimes it was a quiet corner of Asgard, where golden halls echoed faintly with distant footsteps. Other times it was a hillside in Midgard, where grass bent gently with the wind and clouds passed without concern for names or destinies. Loki learned that staying still revealed more than endless wandering ever could. Time behaved differently when one stopped moving. Moments stretched, thoughts slowed, and understanding deepened. In Asgard, Loki became something like a constant background presence. He was rarely addressed directly, yet often nearby. The gods continued their routines, councils, preparations, celebrations, but Loki observed how repetition shaped behavior. He noticed how habits formed unnoticed, how confidence slowly became assumption, and how even wisdom could dull when left unquestioned. He did not interfere. He simply observed, storing these lessons quietly, like a librarian of patterns. When he walked among mortals, he did so without disguise or announcement. He blended naturally into villages and roads, listening more than speaking. He watched people grow older, raise children, and pass on their knowledge in simple ways. Stories told at night, tools handed down, names remembered and forgotten. Loki found these transitions endlessly fascinating. Mortals, though brief in existence, understood something gods often overlooked: the value of time precisely because it ends. He noticed how humans measured their lives not by grand achievements, but by seasons. Harvests, winters survived, reunions, farewells. Loki admired this quiet acceptance of change. It taught him that endurance was not about permanence, but adaptation. Things did not need to last forever to matter. Sometimes their meaning existed only because they were temporary. Loki's cleverness, once sharp and restless, softened into something gentler. He still understood how to alter outcomes, but he rarely felt the need to do so. When he did intervene, it was barely perceptible, a delay that allowed reflection, a moment of doubt that prevented haste, a subtle coincidence that guided someone toward a better path. These actions required no recognition. In fact, they worked best when no one noticed at all. He spent long hours reflecting on identity. Across centuries, he had been many things: observer, wanderer, advisor, shadow. Yet none of these labels fully defined him. Loki began to understand that identity was not fixed, even for gods. It was shaped slowly, through choices repeated over time. Who one became depended less on intention and more on patience. Nature became one of his greatest teachers. He watched mountains erode grain by grain, forests migrate slowly across land, stars shift their positions almost imperceptibly. Nothing hurried, yet everything changed. Loki realized that the universe itself favored gradual transformation. Sudden events drew attention, but slow processes shaped reality. During quiet nights, Loki would sit beneath open skies, listening to the steady breathing of the world. He felt no urgency, no need to prove anything. The long life he lived no longer required validation. It simply continued, moment by moment, observation by observation. In that continuity, he found a calm satisfaction. Occasionally, someone would sense him, not clearly, but as a feeling, a thought that lingered longer than expected, a pause before a decision, a sense that waiting might be wiser than acting. Loki appreciated these moments. They reminded him that influence did not require presence, and guidance did not require authority. As eras changed and memories faded, Loki remained, not unchanged, but refined. He carried centuries of quiet understanding within him, layered gently like sediment beneath a river. He no longer belonged to any single realm or role. He belonged to time itself, moving with it, learning from it, never rushing ahead. And so part 6 of Loki's long quiet life passed not with events, but with awareness, with stillness, with patience deep enough to outlast noise, ambition, and urgency. In the slow rhythm of existence, Loki continued, watching, learning, and enduring content to be a silent witness in a world that never truly stopped moving, even when it appeared completely still. As more centuries drifted by, Loki began to notice something subtle but profound: the way memory faded. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, like footprints softened by wind and time. Events that once seemed important lost their sharp edges. Names were misremembered, stories shortened, details blurred. Loki observed this with quiet fascination, understanding that forgetting was not a flaw of the world, but one of its essential rhythms. He noticed how mortals carried memories differently than gods. Humans held tightly to what they could, passing stories from one generation to the next, knowing that time would eventually take them. Their memories were fragile, yet deeply valued. Loki listened to elders recounting events from their youth, noticing how each telling changed slightly, softened, simplified, or reshaped to fit meaning rather than accuracy. He realized that truth, over time, became less about precision and more about feeling. Among the gods, memory behaved differently. They remembered longer, but not always more clearly. Some events were recalled often, polished into legends, while others were quietly ignored, left to fade into the background. Loki noticed that even immortals chose what to remember and what to forget. Memory, he learned, was selective by nature. It shaped identity just as much as experience itself. Loki reflected on his own past. Across his long life, he had been remembered in many ways, sometimes as clever, sometimes as troubling, sometimes barely at all. These shifting perceptions no longer concerned him. He understood that stories are living things. They change as they are carried forward, shaped by the needs of those who tell them. To be misunderstood was not failure. It was simply part of existing within time. He began to observe how silence influenced memory. Events that were never spoken of seemed to dissolve more quickly, while those repeated often grew larger than life. Loki realized that absence could be as powerful as presence. A thing left unsaid could guide the future just as much as a spoken word. In this understanding, he found a deeper appreciation for restraint and quiet. Wandering through Midgard, Loki saw how places themselves remembered. A road worn smooth by countless feet, a tree marked with old carvings, a ruin slowly reclaimed by earth. These physical memories endured, even when stories faded. Loki would pause at such places, sensing layers of past moments, lingering quietly beneath the present. Time, he realized, does not erase, it rearranges. He noticed how people often lived surrounded by forgotten influences. Traditions continued without explanation. Habits remained long after their origins were lost. Loki found this comforting. It meant that meaning could survive even when memory failed. Something did not need to be fully understood to continue shaping the world. Loki also became aware of how memory affected peace. Those who clung too tightly to the past often struggled to rest. Regrets, grudges, and long-held fears weighed heavily over time. In contrast, those who allowed memories to soften seemed lighter, more able to exist in the present moment. Loki quietly admired this balance, remembering enough to learn, forgetting enough to move forward. During long nights, Loki reflected on how he wished to be remembered, if at all. The thought no longer carried urgency. Whether his name endured or faded did not trouble him. What mattered was that the quiet influence of his choices continued, unseen, unnamed, but present in the flow of events. He understood that some of the most lasting forces leave no clear trace. As eras shifted and new generations replaced the old, Loki remained steady. He became comfortable with being partially remembered, partially forgotten. His story, like all stories, would change, blur, and eventually dissolve into something simpler. And that was enough. In this stage of his long, quiet life, Loki accepted forgetting as a form of rest. Memory, when released, allowed space for calm. The world did not need to carry everything forever. It needed room to breathe, to renew, to move forward gently. And so Loki continued, walking softly through time, carrying what mattered lightly and allowing the rest to fade. In this gentle balance between memory and forgetting, he found a deeper peace, one that did not depend on recognition, accuracy, or permanence, but on quiet presence and steady awareness as the world slowly, endlessly changed. We often think of Loki as the god of mischief, a master of chaos, a whirlwind of ambition and schemes. His story is usually told through grand battles, epic betrayals, and universe-altering events. But what happens when the chaos subsides? What happens when a being defined by his relentless pursuit of power and recognition finally stops running? Today, we're exploring a different side of Loki, one that isn't found in ancient myths or blockbuster movies. This is the story of Loki's journey toward rest, stillness, and finding a quieter, gentler way of being. Imagine Loki, after everything, after the battles, the falls from grace, the desperate attempts to prove his worth. He's seen timelines branch and collapse. He's held the very threads of existence in his hands. The weight of it all, the constant performance, the endless cycle of trying to be seen, it's exhausting. For a being who has lived for millennia, true rest might be the one thing he's never truly experienced. His mind, always racing with plots and possibilities, has never been allowed to simply be quiet. So let's picture him stepping away, not as a punishment, not as an exile, but as a choice. He finds a quiet corner of the universe, a place untouched by Asgardian politics or cosmic threats. Maybe it's a small, forgotten moon with twin suns that paint the sky in shades of lavender and gold. Or perhaps it's a cabin nestled in a deep, ancient forest on a planet where the only sounds are the rustling of leaves and the gentle hum of strange, bioluminescent insects. For the first time, there are no expectations. No throne to win, no brother to outsmart, no destiny to fulfill. There is only the present moment. At first, the silence would be deafening. For someone accustomed to the clamor of court, the roar of battle, and the constant chatter in his own head, stillness would feel alien, even threatening. His instincts would scream at him to do something, create an illusion, stir up some trouble, make his presence known. It's what he's always done. It's who he is, or who he thought he was. But this time, he resists the urge. He forces himself to sit, to watch the twin suns set, to feel the cool breeze on his skin. This is where the real journey begins. It's not about fighting frost giants or cosmic despots. It's about fighting the internal battle against his own nature. He starts to notice the little things he's always been too busy to see. The intricate patterns of frost forming on a window pane, the way a stream carves its path through ancient stones, the quiet resilience of a single flower pushing its way through hardened soil. These things are not grand or glorious, but they possess a kind of magic he's never bothered to understand, the magic of simple existence. He might take up a new craft, something that requires patience and focus. Perhaps he learns to carve wood, his long, elegant fingers, once used for weaving intricate spells and wielding daggers, now gently shaping a piece of timber. Each cut, each smooth surface, is a meditation. He's not creating a weapon or an object of power. He's just making something for the sake of making it. A small bird, a winding serpent, a simple cup. The joy comes not from the final product, but from the process itself, the feeling of creation without agenda. Or maybe he turns to gardening, the god of mischief, tending to a patch of alien soil. It seems almost comical, doesn't it? But think about it. Gardening is an act of faith and patience. You plant a seed, you nurture it with water and care, and you wait. You cannot force a plant to grow faster. You cannot trick it into blooming. You can only provide the right conditions and trust in the natural process. For Loki, who has always tried to bend reality to his will, this would be a profound lesson in surrender. He would learn the rhythm of the seasons, the quiet language of the earth, and the satisfaction of seeing life flourish under his gentle care. As weeks turn into months, and months into years, a change would come over him. The sharp, guarded look in his eyes would soften. The constant tension in his shoulders would release. He would start to find comfort in his own company, no longer needing an audience to validate his existence. The voice in his head that once screamed for recognition would quiet down to a whisper, and then, finally, to a peaceful hum. He would learn to differentiate between loneliness and solitude, discovering a deep well of peace in the latter. This quieter Loki wouldn't be a lesser version of himself. He would still possess all his intelligence, his wit, and his power, but it would be tempered with a new kind of wisdom, the wisdom of stillness. He would understand that true power isn't just about control and domination. It's also about knowing when to let go, when to observe, and when to simply be. His magic might even change, becoming less about grand, flashy illusions and more about subtle, gentle manipulations, mending a broken branch, coaxing a shy creature out of hiding, weaving light into beautiful patterns in the evening sky, just for himself to see. This journey is about more than just Loki taking a vacation. It's a powerful metaphor for anyone who feels trapped in a cycle of striving and burnout. We live in a world that constantly tells us to be more, do more, achieve more. We define ourselves by our productivity, our successes, our titles. Like Loki, we can get so caught up in the performance that we forget who we are when the curtain falls. We forget the simple joy of being. Loki's story of embracing rest teaches us that it's okay to step off the stage. It's okay to choose a quieter path. It's not a sign of weakness or failure. It's an act of profound self-care and rebellion against a world that demands constant motion. Finding peace in stillness, discovering joy in the simple things, and learning to be comfortable in our own skin. These are some of the most powerful, glorious purposes any of us can have. So the next time you think of Loki, don't just picture the trickster or the would-be king. Picture him by a quiet stream, a gentle smile on his face, finally at peace. Not because he conquered a realm, but because he finally conquered the chaos within himself. He learned that sometimes the greatest adventure is the journey inward, and the most valuable treasure is a quiet mind. It's a powerful reminder for us all, in our own busy lives. Maybe at time we found our own quiet corner of the universe and learned to simply rest. As ages passed, Loki began to sense the quiet presence of endings. Not dramatic final moments, but gentle transitions, the soft closing of one phase into another. He noticed how everything carried an ending within it, just as every ending carried the seed of something new. This understanding didn't trouble him. Instead, it brought a deep sense of calm. He observed these endings everywhere. In Midgard, villages slowly changed as old paths were abandoned and new ones formed. Homes were repaired, rebuilt, or quietly left behind. People grew older, passed on their stories, and then faded into memory. These endings weren't harsh. They arrived naturally, like evening following afternoon. Loki learned that resistance only made endings painful. Acceptance allowed them to be gentle. Among the gods, endings appeared differently. Roles shifted, responsibilities changed. Some gods became quieter over time, less involved in the world, retreating into contemplation. Loki noticed how even immortality didn't prevent change. Nothing remained fixed forever. Power softened, certainty faded, a new perspective slowly took shape. Endings, he realized, were not failures, they were simply transitions of form. Loki reflected on cycles. Seasons returned again and again, yet never exactly the same. Forests grew, burned, and then grew back. Rivers shifted their paths but continued flowing. Civilizations followed similar patterns, rising, stabilizing, and eventually transforming into something else. Loki found comfort in this repetition. It meant that no ending stood alone. Everything belonged to a larger rhythm. He also thought about his own long existence. Many phases of his life had already ended periods of mischief, of observation, of influence. Each phase had quietly closed, making space for the next. Loki understood now that he didn't need to hold on to who he had been. Letting go wasn't loss, it was balance. During quiet walks, Loki noticed how nature accepted endings without hesitation. Leaves fell without regret. Snow melted without resistance. Night gave way to morning without argument. The world didn't mourn its changes. It adapted. Loki admired this effortless acceptance and learned from it. He saw how mortals feared endings most when they were sudden, yet when they arrived slowly, they often brought peace. He saw comfort in rituals of closer final conversations, quiet goodbyes, familiar routines repeated one last time. These moments softened the transitions. In long stretches of stillness, Loki contemplated the idea that nothing truly disappears. Energy shifts. Matter changes form. Stories fade but leave impressions. Choices ripple outward long after the moment has passed. Endings were simply points where attention moved elsewhere. This realization eased any lingering weight Loki carried. He no longer measured time by beginnings or endings. He experienced it as a continuous flow, where moments blended seamlessly into one another. Nothing demanded urgency. Nothing required permanence. As centuries continued their quiet passage, Loki walked calmly through these transitions. He neither rushed forward nor clung to what was behind him. He allowed phases of his life to close naturally, trusting that whatever followed would arrive in its own time. In this stage of his long, quiet life, Loki became deeply at ease with change. Endings no longer felt final. They felt like rest, a soft pause between movements, a breath before continuing. In accepting endings, Loki discovered a deeper form of peace, one rooted not in certainty, but in trust. And so he continued, moving gently through cycles large and small, aware that nothing truly ended and nothing truly began. Everything simply changed shape, slowed, and carried on calm, continuous, and unbrokenness. Time flowed quietly around him. As time continued without urgency, Loki reached a phase where even observation softened. The world no longer felt like something to watch closely, analyze, or guide. It simply existed, and that was enough. He found comfort in letting moments pass without naming them, allowing life to unfold without his attention resting on every detail. In this quiet acceptance, the long arc of his existence felt complete, not because it ended, but because it no longer asked anything of him. Loki spent long stretches in familiar places that no longer felt tied to memory. A shoreline where waves arrived and departed without pattern. A forest clearing where light shifted gently through branches. A quiet hall where echoes settled into silence. These places did not demand recollection. They offered presence. Loki understood that presence did not require purpose. It required only awareness, and even that could soften with time. He reflected gently on everything that had passed, not as a sequence of events, but as a texture of experience, observation, patience, forgetting, rest, endings. Each phase had arrived naturally and faded just as naturally. None had been forced, none had been resisted. In this smooth progression, Loki recognized a harmony he had not always noticed before. His long life had not been a path to reach something, but a process of learning how to remain. The idea of legacy no longer held weight for him. Whether remembered or not, named or unnamed, mattered very little. The quiet influence of choices made long ago continued without attribution. The world carried forward, shaped by countless unseen moments, not by stories told aloud. Loki found peace in that anonymity. It felt honest, unburdened, and free. He noticed how the world did not pause for reflection, and yet reflection existed everywhere. In the way grass bent under morning dew, in the steady return of stars to familiar positions, in the calm repetition of tides. Nothing needed acknowledgement to continue. Nothing needed explanation to be meaningful. Loki allowed himself longer periods of stillness than ever before. Sometimes he would remain unmoving for what might have been years, though time no longer felt measurable. In these intervals, thought thinned into awareness, and awareness softened into rest. There were no dreams, no images, only a gentle sense of being carried along with everything else. When he did move, it was without intention. A few steps here, a change of place there. Motion no longer signified purpose. It was simply part of existence, like breathing. Loki understood now that movement and stillness were not opposites. They were part of the same continuous rhythm. He sensed the world continuing, generations rising and fading, landscapes shifting slowly, stars burning steadily in distant silence. None of it required his presence. None of it was diminished without his attention. This realization did not bring emptiness. It brought relief. To exist without necessity was a quiet freedom. Loki's identity, once shaped by contrast and comparison, had gently dissolved into something simpler. Not gone, but unbound. He was not defined by cleverness, observation, or endurance anymore. He simply was. This state required no effort. It asked for nothing. It offered calm. In the deep quiet of this final phase, Loki understood that completion does not come from stopping, but from no longer needing to continue in a particular way. Life did not conclude. It eased, like a sound fading into silence without a sharp ending. His long journeys settled into a steady, peaceful hum beneath existence. And so Loki remained, not watching closely, not influencing quietly, not resting deeply, but existing gently. Time flowed, the world turned, change continued without demand. In this soft balance, nothing was missing, and nothing was required. The long, quiet life of Loki did not end. It simply became indistinguishable from the calm movement of the universe itself, steady, unremarkable, and complete in its stillness. And in that calm, everything was at rest.